Good evening, folks, and welcome to Discovering. A new fishing season is upon us, so remember to get your new fishing licenses. And 2026 has a few new regulation changes this year, and there were some potential changes that didn't happen. I sat down with the Michigan DNR to talk about what those changes are.
So those are the two lakes that will have this protected slot limit in place for walleye.
And there's a fly fishing film festival coming up this weekend in Marquette.
It's a good family-friendly event.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night, and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Every year when the new fishing regulations handbook comes out, there's a few new changes. If it's a species that you fish for or a lake that you frequent, you pay attention. Otherwise, you probably don't even notice. This year, a few significant changes were made, and depending on where, what, and how you fish, might impact your next fishing trip. To get some insight on these noteworthy regulation changes and the rationale behind them, I talked with Michigan DNR Lake Superior Basin Coordinator David Carafino. First up, underwater spearfishing.
So underwater spearfishing has always been around in Michigan. Underwater spearfishers have been able to spear rough fish. And then about 4 years ago, they petitioned the NRC to open up game fish for them. And so there was a new opportunity that was put in place on a trial basis that allowed underwater spearfishers to spear lake trout, northern pike, and walleye in southern Lake Michigan and southern Lake Huron.
Last fall, the DNR recommended to the Natural Resources Commission to make the temporary opportunity permanent, but only in those same waters.
So the DNR recommended that what was currently going on be continued, but the sunset be removed. The NRC did amend our recommendations, and they did open up essentially all of the Great Lakes to underwater spearfishing for northern pike, lake trout, and walleye. There are some key closures that you can refer to, the maps, some key areas around the Lake Chanel Islands, Beaver Island, northern parts of Lake Michigan. There are some closures there. Standard Rock is closed, Big Reef is closed, but the vast majority of the Great Lakes waters are now open to underwater spearfishing for northern pike, lake trout, and walleye, in addition to the other considered rough fish species that have always been open. And this was pushed by the underwater spearfishing community. They were very interested in trying to expand both in terms of the number of species that were available to harvest. They wanted to harvest all game species, and also where they wanted to do it. So the DNR did put together a working group that included constituents, it included underwater spearfishers, a lot of internal staff to try to figure out what makes the most sense for underwater spearfishing regulations. There wasn't consensus from that group, but ultimately the DNR recommendation from that group ended up with, let's stay status quo on the geographic areas in the species. But the NRC wanted to provide more opportunity.
All the rules and regulations for underwater spearfishing are in the handbook. And a few new regulations that David and I did not discuss. There is a new catch and immediate release season on Lake Sturgeon on the Menominee River, and that's from Grand Rapids Dam to the Sturgeon Falls Dam from the first Saturday in June through the first Sunday in March. And I've mentioned it the last couple shows, but it is worth reiterating. Burbot now have a possession limit of 5 fish per day. We'll talk more about regulation changes at Standard Rock and Big Reef after the break. Beginning this year, Standard Rock and Big Reef in Lake Superior have a daily possession limit of 1 trout with a 15-inch minimum size. Since 2010, it has been a 5-fish limit. Standard Rock is a world-class lake trout fishing destination located 45 miles north of Marquette. Big Reef is also a destination lake trout fishery north of the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore.
Both Big Reef and Standard Rock are unique in that we don't believe there's exchange of lake trout with nearshore. We have tons of lake trout nearshore in Lake Superior, and then we have these 2 offshore sites where we don't think the fish that are nearshore go out there, and we don't think the fish that are out there come nearshore. So they're unique populations, and they're small populations.
Fishing these 2 reefs has gained in popularity both with social media, plus better boats and navigation systems have made the reefs more accessible than they ever were.
And like everything in our world, technology changes everything. And there has been a lot more awareness of these 2 sites, Standard Rock in particular, because of YouTube videos, social media. It's not easy, it's a trip, not anybody can do it. But it is a destination fishery that has grown in popularity just because of the publicity that it's gotten.
And as the managers of those fisheries, the DNR has to keep up with the increased pressure at these sites.
So the challenges that we have is that those 2 areas are very unique populations. We know they're small populations, and because they're growing in popularity, we want to manage those 2 areas differently than the nearshore lake trout populations. If you want to catch lake trout in Lake Superior, go a mile offshore and you can catch as many lake trout as you want, okay? Depends on the time of year, depends where you are, but it's not difficult to catch a lake trout in Lake Superior. We want those offshore fisheries to be different. They have larger fish, they've got a very different size structure, as biologists like to talk about. We want to try to preserve that unique fishing opportunity in Lake Superior for those larger fish. So harvesting 5 lake trout a day with more fishing pressure at those offshore sites, we had some concerns that we might see a reduced size structure, fewer larger fish out there as people harvested more fish. So the idea was, as we're trying to manage these 4 larger fish and for these unique experiences, that we wanted to take a look at lowering that daily possession limit. And so that was what we did. We worked with our citizens, we worked with our advisory committee, and we proposed reducing that limit to 2 fish per day for both Standard Rock and for Big Reef.
After the DNR decided to propose a 2-fish creel limit, a 2025 survey showed changes at Big Reef.
In summer of 2025, our research crew out of Marquette did a fishery independent survey. They went out and did a survey of Big Reef, and they actually found a reduced size structure. They found that some of the larger fish that they had observed at Big Reef 10, 15, 20 years ago were not there this past year. So that did raise a yellow flag for us, and we did provide that information to our Citizen Advisory Committee. And based on that information, which did go to the NRC took a step more in the conservative direction, and they decided that they supported our idea of managing these 2 places differently and reducing that possession limit, but they wanted to see it go even further. And so the NRC proposed an amendment to make the daily limit 1 fish at Standard Rock and Big Reef, and that's ultimately what they passed in November of this last year. So in 2026, at Standard Rock and at Big Reef, only 1 lake trout could be retained.
Not all fish that are caught survive, so I was curious how that was factored into the decision to reduce the creel limit.
One of the things that did come up was a proposal to have catch and release only. And the reason that didn't gain any more traction is because mortality is a potential and is a concern. And we did want people to retain a fish if it does happen to die, so we're not wasting the resource. That said, not as many fish die out there as one might think. So just because a fish is bloated or their gas bladder is bloated doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to die.
I asked Dave if these reefs are predominantly catch and release, or are a lot of anglers harvesting fish at them.
What we've seen from data from the charter fishery is that largely the fishery at Big Reef is more harvest oriented. The fishery at Standard Rock is a mix. So we see both, but Standard Rock does have more catch and release fishing than Big Reef in the data that we've collected.
I asked what the response from anglers was when they proposed this reduced creel limit.
This one was difficult because of the mixed desire for that fishery. If you go out there and harvested 5 fish right now, you don't want to see it cut to 2 or to 1. If you go out and release everything, you don't want to see it at 5. So we did have a kind of a mixed bag in reactions there. We did all sort of will live with 2. That's why we landed on that as kind of our happy space. But the NRC decided to be a bit more conservative. So in 2026, at Standard Rock and at Big Reef, only 1 lake trout could be retained.
Last year, the Michigan DNR proposed protected slot limits for walleye on 10 inland lakes in the Upper Peninsula. This would be a first for Michigan. Only 2 of those 10 lakes were approved by the Natural Resources Commission. I had a couple viewers ask me to investigate why the other 8 lakes didn't make the cut. First, what is the protected slot limit the DNR wanted to implement and why?
So what we wanted to do was move from a 15-inch minimum size to then allow people to still harvest fish at 15 inches, but then if they caught walleye that were between 18 and 23 inches, those would have to be returned to the water. If they caught walleye over 23 inches, one of those could be retained as part of the daily possession limit. The idea behind that was to try to improve walleye populations by increasing the number of females that are in the population, so by increasing the number of fish that are in that 18 to 23 inch window. The thought was if we could do that, then we would see better recruitment or more walleye produced every year in these lakes. We wanted to help natural reproduction of walleye. We've seen region-wide in Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula, we've seen walleye populations declining for a variety of reasons. There's only a few tools that we have to really help boost those populations. We can do habitat projects, which are difficult, time, labor intensive, expensive. We can stock fish, but we're very limited in how many fish we can stock, where we get brood sources from. So that's not always the best option. So the other tool we have is regulations. And so we can try to manipulate the harvest and how we kill fish through harvest regulations.
How did the DNR choose those 10 lakes?
So we spent a lot of time discussing what lakes make the most sense for this. And we chose lakes, for the most part, that had very strong natural reproduction that we have seen some changes in. We've seen some declines in reproduction in some of those lakes. We chose lakes that we have good data for because we wanted to be able to evaluate this change. What impacts does this have to the population? So having data before the regulation went into effect was really important. And we also chose kind of a variety of lakes. Some were small, some were medium, some were large, and they spanned on the west end as far west as Gogebic, and on the east end as far east as Big Manistee. So we wanted to get that geographic spread as well.
One of those 10 proposed lakes was Lake Gogebic on the west end. I covered the DNR meeting for that lake back in January of last year, just because it's the closest to me.
By and large, we saw a lot of support. We had different avenues that we pursued to receive public feedback. We had some really targeted meetings where we went and spoke to lake associations. We had some broad public meetings. We also gathered feedback online. And by and large, we saw a lot of support. People were very open-minded, and as we explained, this is the problem we're seeing, this is the proposed solution, and this is what how we'd like to try to address it. People were supportive of trying that.
The Natural Resources Commission has the final authority to implement an order as presented or amend as they see fit. The Commission voted on it last November.
The NRC voted in favor of 2 lakes, and so only 2 of the 10 will have this protected slot limit. Those 2 are both near Marquette. It's Teal Lake, and then also Lake Independence up by Big Bay. So those are the 2 lakes that will have this protected slot limit in place for walleye starting this spring.
I spoke with NRC Commissioner Becky Humphreys about why the Commission approved only 2 of the 10 lakes that were proposed.
We heard a lot of pushback from user groups or individuals especially who they felt there were 2 concerns. One, they thought the slot limit was too narrow, that it was going to be too restrictive on the lake. And there were simpler ways to do a regulation that would have achieved the same thing as the primary message that we were getting from them. And then there were concerns with the process that went through for the public meetings. Evidently, you have people that are both downstate owners of property up here as well as local people. And we heard pretty loud and clear that the local meetings happened and were properly noticed, but the statewide notice came out very late and was very short window. So, and the slot limits were proposed for it was 12 years, so it was a long period of time. So at that point, we talked to the department about, okay, we're hearing a lot of pushback on this. folks that are not supportive of it. So we went ahead with 2 of the lakes where we heard very clear support. There were other lakes that had mixed support, and a couple, that we heard a lot of opposition to. So those we held back. The department can always come back to us with something that's, after they have some additional discussion on those lakes. I give the department credit. They are putting these limits on to try and figure out ways to improve that walleye fishery. We don't have the walleye stocking that we used to. We don't have the ability to do it monetarily, and the fish availability privately is not always there. So there were concerns, there are concerns in terms of having good, well-managed walleye fisheries, but with this we didn't feel good support to go quite this way on those other lakes. So they might bring it back, they might not, but at that point we felt that it required a little more discussion.
I also spoke with Becky Humphreys about a couple more topics, plus what the NRC is and does, and I'll have more of that interview in a couple of weeks. For all you fly anglers and film aficionados, the Fred Wara chapter of Trout Unlimited has a film festival coming up on April 11th in Marquette.
So the film festival started 3 years ago, where we did a film festival via Trout Unlimited with their films, and it was decided that we really wanted to do films of our own local filming rather than having big fly fishing films from around the world. It would be really nice to see fly fishing right here in the Midwest because we have outstanding fishing right here. So 2 years ago, we took upon ourselves to curate our own locally made and locally sourced films from around the Midwest because we have outstanding fishing right here.
The fest includes films from 2 local filmmakers.
Seth Waters from out on the West End, and then who was also a local guide, and then Benjamin Haight, who has the guide service Haight's Wanderings. Both of those guys have films in there that they've created specifically for the festival, and super excited to debut those. We also do a competition amongst our Salmon in the Classroom teachers for them to make their own film for the festival, so we will be featuring one of our Salmon in the Classroom films from one of our local teachers. It's a good family-friendly event. A couple of the films, I will say, a couple of the films have expletives in that fishing can get intense at times, but those expletives are bleeped out. And that's really only in a couple of them. Most of them are completely clean, but as much as that's hard to do when you're fishing sometimes and things get a little crazy. But yeah, it's definitely a family-friendly event for kids of all ages. So, and the films are super motivating, and even if you're someone who's not hardcore fishermen, they're still just awe-inspiring to watch. So
the event features more than just films.
So it's being held at the Northern Center. Doors open at 4:30. 4:30 to 6 is our cabin fever. We've got lots of raffles. We've got guide trips we're raffling off, all kinds of merchandise raffling off, several guides there, as well as conservation groups that you can talk to. We've also got a section of that Northern Center set up for fly casting. So you can try your hand at fly casting, compete a little bit if you want, or even get a little bit of instruction from some of the guides on improving your cast during that time. And then our films start at 6 p.m. Our first reel will run from 6 to 7, and then we'll have a 20-minute intermission for everybody to get some additional food and whatnot. We will have pizza there for everybody. That's part of your ticket price. And then from 7 to 8, we will run our second reel. And then from 8 to 9, we'll raffle off all the prizes.
Tickets are $25 and are available for purchase at the door, or you can purchase them in advance on their website, where you can also find more details.
So the purpose of our festival, it's our major fundraiser for the year. So our chapter does a whole lot of stream cleanup, stream restoration, a lot of temperature monitoring of streams, because we're all about taking care of the cold water fisheries. And as you know, if our temperatures or our streams are rising, then we need to address what's going on, what we can do so it doesn't hurt those species. And then the other part of our chapter's mission is a whole lot of education and outreach. So this helps to fundraise money for the Salmon in the Classroom program that we do, along with the other things like our tying of flies workshop that we do, as well as a fly fishing workshop. So it's a major fundraiser for the chapter to end up doing great things in the area for our cold water fisheries and people to better understand and appreciate them.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.